Hello everybody, we are back on Gelvin Valley, Farming Simulator 15. Actually, I'm just continuing to farm from where I was before. I just broke this up into a new episode. But continuing on this wonderful map made by Wild Wild Wes. And even though this is an old game, I still gotta admit I'm pretty captivated by the scenery that he created in here. Even though it's getting on a little late in the night. You know, with this great demand, this is what farmers would do in real life. We have a great demand for canola. Actually, maybe I'll get around this bend and we'll just go see what it is. Great demand. Let's see how much longer. Oops, I went the wrong way. 2 hours. Yeah, yikes. I I don't know if I'm going to be able to harvest the rest of my canola and take advantage of the great demand, but I'm going to give a whack at it. I just don't know if I can harvest all of 38 in 2 hours. Maybe I can. But I kind of got to beat cheeks to get back down to the field and offload my combine. I think in an earlier episode I had it was this old truck that it's right when the Great Demand happened. It was this old truck that I leased for a little bit, something a little bigger that I could use to haul my grain or my canola out of storage. Trying to go fast here, but my driving is of course showing how poor it is. I just love that he forces you to go through a creek. That's just one awesome aspect of the map. Reminds me of when I worked on Lone Oak. We had a canyon, and of course in most canyons a river runs through it, a creek, so we were always driving through it. They eventually created a bridge, but lots of driving through it, getting the old tires wet. So we'll just keep thumping on here. I think in one of these I told a story about my grandfather doing that. You know, it can happen in real life when you have something like a great demand, some reason to stay in the field maybe a little bit longer than you would. And you know, I mean, all we know is just what's local typically. With the crops that are grown in the area where I live, you know, this in game time, it's 20 to 10. It was a rare day that we would be out harvesting that late at night because typically in our area the dew comes on, and if you're harvesting windrows and grass seed, it just got too wet and you had to quit. You couldn't thresh it, and you ran the constant risk of plugging your combine because it was too wet and it just didn't bang all the seeds out. So didn't have much of a choice. But I know there's other areas, and I don't know if anybody ever listens to this who's from Canada. I heard a story one time harvesting up there that it was like an early winter or something, and they had a bunch of wheat still in the fields. I think it was wheat, and so it was wet during the day. They weren't able to take the combines out in the field, and the grain stalks were wet. It was cold and nasty. But at night, everything froze. So they were able to actually harvest at night versus during the day, because that's when the ground was solid enough for them to get out there. And, you know, I guess it stands to reason. It seems like, though, there'd be a lot of friction, you know, with the moving parts of a combine, that even though it isn't heated down in there, it seems like all those wheat kernels that even if it's frozen, I mean, if they had any dew, I would think there would be some moisture down in the combine, and maybe there was. This is just a story that I heard. I don't know where in Canada that's how they were able to harvest the last of their wheat. So, but maybe someone, if anybody here is Canadian, maybe they can tell me whether that's ever happened or not. Don't think it would happen here. But, you know, a couple years ago, I was traveling in the Midwest part of our country where there's a lot of corn and soybeans grown. And the corn, as I understand it, we better keep an eye on the combine here. Back far enough so he doesn't feel like he can't turn around. But I believe when we were heading back there was it March? It was well into, it was cold. I think it was still frozen. There may have been snow even there. I think we were coming through Nebraska, somewhere in there, and there was still standing corn from the previous year that hadn't been harvested. And I was just shocked to see a combine literally out in the field harvesting the stuff, kind of out in the cold like that. So I guess it's possible. All that to say is it's entirely reasonable for us to be out here with our combine, plugging away at this canola because, well, by George, we got a good reason. We hope to make some money. 2 hours. Got to keep watching it like a hawk. And the price is still headed down, so probably when the hour turns over, I'm going to get gypped again, and it's going to go down some more. Just got to keep making some headway on this. I'm actually glad now that I planted all this canola. I was thinking I was going to take a bloodbath, but and were it not for the great demand, I think I would be. But anywho, some time ago, before there was a lot of interruptions of I don't know what, other things to talk about, I guess. I could even look at my notes here. Yes, I take notes on these episodes now because I gotta fill out descriptions on YouTube and what have you. Aha. Over 10 episodes ago, there was something that came up. I was talking about a library, uh, book library, and then the concept of a game library came up too. And I know everybody has, anybody that's doing gaming stuff probably has some kind of library to choose from. And kind of like I've mentioned, just to find stuff to talk about in here, I started sharing my game library, which is basically a lot of strategy type games, business simulation, that kind of thing, particularly farming related stuff. But just for kicks and giggles, I thought I would share some of the others that I have in here. Most of these are pretty old. Um, I don't even know if I could get them to run on this computer. I'm just looking at one here now. These two are, I guess, they're kind of related to war, but they're kind of history related. I really enjoy history too. It's still not enough to fill this thing. I just want to make sure I zip across the valley to empty it as soon as I got her full. Yeah, I better just head up here. Get out of his way so he can turn around. So I got two games here that are kind of history games. I don't remember the year. Probably says somewhere on here what the year is. One is called American Civil War. And when I say Civil War, that these are old games, believe me, you don't. I'm not a shoot 'em up kind of person. Like I say, it's for the strategy of it, so it's almost like playing a board game on the computer. I never did play it all that much. I enjoyed putting it in. It's a CD, so that's kind of how old it was back in the CD era. That's how you would get games. So it had a lot of battles. I seem to recall you would choose from historical names and figures, you would choose who you wanted to be your general, uh, where you wanted to fight a particular battle or whatnot. Just how true it was to history, I don't know. I almost kind of think the thing, yeah, this is your chance to rewrite American history. Yeah, if only. That's kind of a decent question in its own right. If you could rewrite the history of your nation, how would you write it? Obviously, none of us can. There is kind of a class of books that are out there where authors will play the what if game. I think I've seen a couple of them. What if Hitler would have won World War II? Yeah, well, what if indeed? What if Hitler had gotten the nuclear bomb? What would he have done with it? And fortunately, a lot of times this what if is usually you like to think that most of the wars are won by the good guys, whoever those are. But what if the bad guys had won instead? What might the world look like at this point, and how different would it be? Come on, Combine. Here, let me help you out in this corner. How about that? Should I just teach you how to turn a corner? I know it's difficult. Hey, are we wide enough to take that? I think we are. Let's put that down. Ooh, done. Help it take out that little piece. Oops. Maybe we'll get this field done. What do I know? Like I say, we got 2 hours to get her done. I take for granted that, or I keep thinking I have the smaller header, but yeah, you know what? We got a passable. We can make a run at this. I think everywhere else this is my last canola field. We're gonna take a stab at this. So, if anybody wants to reply in the comments, if you could rewrite your nation's history, how would you rewrite it? Um, I know I just started talking about computer games, but the question kind of intrigues me now. Oh, I'm full. I can go. What would I rewrite about my nation's history? You know, I think there's a lot of current things that I would love to rewrite. But looking at the... Oops, I better head up this way. Looking at the past, I wish our nation had never had slaves. And I know we're not the only nation that's ever had slaves. I know, like in the UK, they had it. I'm trying to remember the name. I think it was an MP in British Parliament who worked for years and years and years to abolish slavery. Wilberforce, that's what his name was, I think. Maybe I'm not saying that right, and someone from the UK can correct me. I think he was actually a Christian man who, helped abolish slavery through legislature there, however it happened. I'm not well versed on that history. I know just enough to remember the name. But that's kind of how America got started, and a lot of the founders had slaves. And I mean, there's been apologists over the years try to say this, that, and the other, but you know, historical fact is what it is, and I don't see any need to sugarcoat it. Slavery is wrong, and we engaged in it. And fortunately now, we don't have that anymore. Though it still feels like our nation is paying a price. There's still people to this day that troubles them, the past, and it's maybe a combination of things. Some people find it difficult to get past that, and others maybe are too quick to just explain it away or pretend like it never happened or to poo-poo it, and I don't know that either attitude is helpful, to a nation. Because we don't have slavery anymore. But like I say, it still feels like we live in the shadow of it. And maybe some of what it is I don't care what nation it is, when you engage in that kind of behavior as a nation, or bad behavior, even if you eventually repent, just to use a term, and say, whoops, we shouldn't have done that, we're sorry, we're totally changing course, we're doing something different. Even if you do that, there's a lot of scars, that still remain in a nation, and the people to which, were enslaved, or to whom things, were done to, they aren't likely to forget it as quickly as maybe the others, and maybe it depends on what the nation does. Um, it's just there is scars when there's that kind of activity. I think of Germany, for example, in World War II. It's historical fact. They did what they did. Uh, and I don't know all of the history, but the fact of the matter is they put Hitler in power, and presumably a majority of the populace stood behind him to do what he did. And we all look back on that now and say, how could you? And Germany, to its credit, has, in my mind, gone above and beyond trying to atone for that error. Um, unlike, and again, I don't mean to be political, unlike, say, Japan, to my knowledge. I mean, Japan's a wonderful country now, a trading partner and all that, on good relations with us, but to my knowledge, I don't know that they've ever apologized for what they did in the war back then, or to China. Uh, I don't know why. It, yeah, props to Germany for doing that, at least in my understanding. I mean, who knows? I mean, there's other people that may listen to this that are far better historians than I will ever be. That's just kind of my perspective at the moment based on what I know, but maybe someone will educate me that it's different even from what I understand. I guess that the point I'm trying to make is, even though Germany has done all that, I maybe should ask someone from Germany sometime if they still feel like they live in the shadow of what Hitler did. As if they can never again, lift their head high, or always have to just feel like they're scarred permanently. You know what I mean? I mean, the people that are there today, they didn't do any of that. They had nothing to do with that. And so to continue to blame a nation for its past errors, I mean, that just doesn't seem right. But that's just me. Nor do I think they should feel that way. I mean, we all got to acknowledge the sins of the past, if you will. I mean, my nation has plenty of wars. And it seems like as time goes by, it has more and more of them. And, as they declassify materials in our government as to things that they've done back in the day. I mean, man, there are things I've read, that our government has done that just appall me, as to how they've treated other nations or meddled. And I suppose somebody somewhere thought there was a good reason, but I don't know, they really make me squirm in my seat. But by the same token, I didn't tell them to do that. A lot of this was long before my time, and what do? When you learn dirt about yourself, the very country you're in, I don't know, it's kind of uncomfortable, but much more public, has been like slavery. Um, so that's been much more talked about even to the current day. But some of these other things that come out of the woodwork, that are just appalling. It's like, how could a free nation do that? But kind of the initial question was, if you could rewrite your nation's history, what would you do? And if I could abolish slavery at the very beginning, I think I would have. I think there were people who wanted to, but for whatever reason, it wasn't abolished immediately. Eventually, it was, and it took blood, took a war to get rid of it. I don't know that it took a war in the UK in order to pull that off. Somehow they were able to without a war. And I realize that wasn't the only issue for which, we had a civil war in our country. there was a lot of other things going on. Some of it, and it may happen again. And there's people that still talk to this day, and it kind of worries me. I don't like the idea of thinking about a civil war. I mean, first off, it's not very aptly named. There's nothing civil about it. With brother fighting brother, if you will. But I think there was more to it. Control with the northern industrialists, the South with their cotton plantations, agriculture centered, states' rights versus the federal government, and just where lines should be drawn there. So there was a lot of issues there, and looking back, it's easy to say, well, why in the world did you go to war over all this? Couldn't you figure out your differences? Well, who am I to say that? I wasn't there. I don't know. But maybe if we wouldn't have had slaves at the beginning, maybe we wouldn't have had to go through that horrible war. Who knows? Who knows? I guess you say that about a lot of wars. I'm trying to think what else. That's maybe something that comes to mind. I think, well, let me see here. I could change something else. We have a public education system here. I think what I would like with that is, oh, still not enough to fill this up. Local control. And we still have somewhat local control. I know in the state where I live, though, it's more and more power is being consolidated into the hands of a few. There's any number of school districts in our state, and each one of those is going to have a board where they make decisions and what have you. But I think the more local the control can be made, then the more input parents can have kind of in the process as to how their children are educated. There's a lot of things that have come out in our schools here of late that are very disagreeable politically, and again, I don't want to get too much into politics, but there's a lot of things that are being forced by somebody, and there's a whole lot of parents that are upset about some of the things their children are being taught or forced to learn. So, local control, no slaves, and local control of schools. Yeah, that about covers it, right? Who's to say? It's kind of like looking at a person's at your past. There's things in my life, looking back, that I would handle differently if I could do them over. Just mistakes that a person makes. It isn't just a nation that commits error. It commits error because it's composed of lots of individuals in it that also commit lots of errors. And sometimes those are well-intentioned, and they're doing things in good faith, and they're just simply wrong. Sometimes they're deliberate, and there's maybe some agenda, sinister. Sometimes you just flat out screw up. You have a bad idea, and your idea doesn't work, or whatever it is. Who knows? But even in a person's own life, maybe there's a relationship that went sideways on you for some reason. I'm going to help this guy get around this bend. We're just going to do it this way. And you wish you could go back and do it differently, do it better, so that the same mistakes don't get made. I assume I'm not the only one that, would like to right some of those wrongs. But the fact of the matter is, if you could go back and redo it, there's also the possibility you'd end up making more mistakes than you made the first time. So anytime we look at the past, and I don't know, I guess maybe what I'm revealing is I'm kind of an introspective person, and I know other people are better able than I am to leave the past in the past and move on and And maybe that's just tougher for me with my temperament. That's just kind of how I am. Um, but what would you say, wherever you're listening to this from, if you could rewrite the history of your nation, what is something you would change in it for the better, I presume? And and you know what? I imagine there's a lot of radical things that people maybe would come up with, and probably not all of us would agree. Maybe most of us listening to this would agree, yeah, slaves are a bad thing. But I could see someone else coming up with something that maybe they think is a good idea, but that I think would bankrupt the nation, if it was implemented. Or that wouldn't, might be good for some people, but wouldn't be good for personal accountability or whatnot, and would destroy the nation in other ways. But, so I mean, there's probably just a boatload of all those things that some would agree to, some wouldn't. Uh, yeah, it's hard to say. But what would you change? I won't ask you to put down what you would do differently in your life. I'd have to do a lot of thinking just on my own. Oh, there's so many things I would love to change and undo. Things I did and regret. You can just say, oh, that's mistakes of the youth. Everybody makes mistakes. And yeah, that's true. I remember my dad used to tell a story. I almost think it's something an old preacher said about the nature of, to a Christian with sin, which, I realize there's going to be non-Christians that listen to this. I don't know what you call it in your worldview, in terms of error that you make. Christian would call it sin. But anyway, the example that my dad would tell me about is, for this guy had a son, and every time he committed a sin, an error, his dad would pound a nail, and obviously this is a fable. He would pound a nail into a post, and so over time, the son, being a sinner like everybody else on the planet, and imperfect, he accumulated a whole lot of nails in this post. And looking at the post, you couldn't even hardly see the wood anymore on the post. All you saw was the gleaming tips of all these nail heads, where the dad had pounded nails in, because, well, the son was a sinner and good at it. Well, then came the day when the son decided, you know what, I need to make a change in my life, do something different, and kind of again, in the Christian worldview, he repented of his sin and tried to change his ways. And so his father went out to the post and nail by nail pulled them all out of the post. And again, I mean, this story never happened for real. It's just kind of to illustrate a point. Um, he pulled it all out. It took a lot of work, and the father and the son stood there kind of looking at this post. And the father said, "Well, son, you've made a change in your life. Your sin has been forgiven, and you're now whole, and you can start living a different life, and try to keep as much as you can from, making these mistakes again." And the son said, "Well, yes, that's true," but he said, "But look at all the holes." And that's the scars, I guess, I'm talking about, just philosophizing even as a nation, whether it's slavery that we have, or some policy that we had to act in the day, some leader that we had, like in the case of Germany or Italy, that took the nation down a path that was unhelpful to the world, if I can put it that way, or was, yeah, just corrupt. Hopefully we can get past those things and turn things around. But the trouble is kind of like the example with the posts. all those things leave holes and kind of shape the psyche of a nation for a long, long time to come, whether you wish it did or not. All right, surely he has enough in here to fill me the rest of the way. Oh, I haven't played this Civil War game in ages. Well, like I say, back in the day when they made games, they were pretty simple compared to how they are now. Now I'm sure you could probably find a Civil War game out there where you run a little soldier or a group of them and go along and shoot bullets. Not so with this one here. You kind of had to use your imagination. Fill me up. Very good. Alright, is he gonna... You know what? Just have mercy on my combine. Let me help him get turned around. Why is this still... I keep getting out of IC control and I don't want it. Alright. Get back up and take this motor around. Folks, we are almost done with this field. Alright, I'm going to head up the hill with this and make another sale. Actually, what's the price? Please don't drop too much more. Still falling. But I know it's still... Yeah, I think the price of canola is just flat out tanking. But this is the best price I'm going to be able to ever get. So I'm going to head on up the hill with this, make another sale. I'm going to try to sell all of this within the window of time that I have. Oops, looks like I need to go further downhill. Find the gate. But I see I've ran through another half hour, so I'm going to terminate the episode there. Again, thanks for stopping by and taking time to watch. Really appreciate it. Hope I didn't bore you, and hope you have a lovely day with whatever you're doing. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye for now.